Does anyone have any views about Wikipedia? Okay, as tutors, do you say don't go to Wikipedia for your answers? Okay, it's a common sort of statement from academics here, but beware of some of the things in Wikipedia. Wiki University might be a place that has stuff that's useful to you. The statistics about the people who contribute to Wikipedia are that they're actually at a very high academic standard, a lot of them, the people who do a lot of the stuff. So there isn't a counter-argument to the don't go to Wikipedia, that the quality of the stuff in there is as good as other sources in some instances. And I think I'm going to finish by saying, can you just bring us the delicious, is the next thing delicious? Yeah, just to give you a chance, if you want to make a note of that URL, it's the delicious social bookmarking site that we use, and we put stuff in the last few days that are particularly relevant to some of the things we've said today. So you just go to it, it's a sharing site, it gives you links and reasons why you might want to look at things. And for those of people on the SurveyMonkey response who said they were already using social bookmarking, at least 3 I think it was said they were using Delicious. There is a link in there about some of the possibilities for an alternative to Delicious when and if Yahoo do remove it. And the big players in the field seem to be Digo and Google Bookmarks. So you need to think about whether you're using those tools. That's one of the warnings. It's a kind of final warning, like the scary bit at the beginning about your footprint, is that we're relying on this social media stuff to be there. But something even as big as Yahoo could remove one of the really good tools just because they've got a change in their business model, and that's what they've chosen to do. So you need to be aware of that note of caution. And I think really it's just a question saying, is there any questions anyone wants to ask? That's really our pitch on trying to encourage you to think how social media might have some advantage to you as students here and possibly in your life as following on. Does anyone want to ask any questions? Yes, please.
What's your view on online lectures, do you think? Online
lectures, right. My view is that they might have a place, but they need to be part of a whole. I don't like particularly the idea of, if I was given the choice of which of these to argue for, I would be arguing that lecturers are useful, lecturers and lectures. But there is a distinct advantage in saying, maybe make a podcast of the summary of a lecture for students. I mean, the whole point about, if I put my PowerPoint slides or whatever I've done in a lecture up on our virtual learning environment, they're actually not very meaningful without the other stuff that I said at the time. They might be just lists of words or graphics and things. So I would argue that in order to make them useful, they've got to have some added bonus. So they might be either a separate topic or something that adds value to what you've already done. But then having said that, we're working in the university on quite a lot of distance education stuff, and we're trying to make sure that the lecturers make sure that they deal with the difference in delivering via distance education and encompass the needs of engagement and actions. So it's a kind of I kind of think it was part of a whole, maybe.
So do you see it as like direct competition? For example, how you can do so many courses online now?
Well, that's something that the education sector, certainly in the UK, has got to consider, because there's a whole thing about the introduction of higher fees, whether there's a move towards shorter degrees. There's even things like, did you see things in the press about Pearson Education maybe being authorised to be validated degrees? They're a publisher of educational materials. Okay, there's a challenge to the traditional structure of education. I'm the jury's out really as far as that's concerned, as far as I'm concerned. Don't know. Any other comments from you about the distance education? So you're working a lot in that.
I think with the use of online lectures, I think the video recording of something like today is only useful up to a point. I think they're nice to have as a resource that you can look back and pick up any points. In reality, I think that kind of tool or that kind of resource has to be tied in to something else, like an activity at the very least, and some form of reflection. I think as a standalone, recording, it's only useful up to a point, and that for you to get any benefit from it, and for the lecturer to get any benefit, it has to be tied in with some form of activity, reflection, or something.
I mean, can you remember the situation that arose when VCRs became more prevalent, and there was a whole discussion in education about whether we could record our lectures and then lodge them somewhere and go home and do something else, and that just didn't happen. Partly because lecturers didn't want that to happen, partly because the students were demanding some kind of interaction to happen. So I kind of think it's a bit of a parallel with that, really. Can I just kind of conclude by, we introduce ourselves as educational developers. The conversations we have with our academic colleagues is based around, instead of recording your lectures, Maybe you should do something to introduce yourself to the students before they get there. Have a really interesting thing about what your course is going to be about. Do some introductory stuff about yourself. Use that medium, and then use the ability to do audio or other feedback mechanisms. That doesn't mean they've got to come into the room and talk to you, but they still get the inflection and the passion or whatever it is you're giving them in the feedback loop. And that's kind of one of the pushes that we're making, to consider different means of feedback for the benefit of those students. The students, anecdotally, I haven't got any physical evidence of it, anecdotally do like to be able to hear feedback. Okay, I think I'll probably need to wrap up there, so can I just thank you for your attention and been a really interesting session. Thank you very much.